All right, one time for your mind on your Friday night. That's right.
Love that intro and outro.
Oh man, it's good to have you here.
Yeah, but it's actually really fucking good to be here, because when you came and saw me when you were in Toke, you were saying how like you'd started a podcast but COVID hit and you couldn't fucking interview anybody, but you wanted to do it in person. But then, like, I've heard that many times. I've had people on there say, I'm doing a podcast, and then they're like most people, they get to 10 and fail, and you've got to 12 and you've done 2 more interviews as well. And so you're continuing to go. You've managed to do those all in person. So, like, and they've been quality too as well. So bloody awesome job, man. It's cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's been a busy time, considering that I've started in early Feb.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of just like almost every single week I've been hammering one out. So it's been good. It's been keeping me on track and honest with myself as well.
Yeah,
but
man.
I think the most important thing about it is I do it because I enjoy it. Like I don't care what I get out of it, like if there's any hype or if there's, because people always ask me that kind of stuff. It's like, what are you hoping to achieve with it? It's like, I do it because I enjoy it. Like that's my Friday night. Y'all get out, get on the piss. Like this is what I do. I enjoy one-on-one conversations.
And that's why it's working, because like I think that's the problem with many people. They get the reality of booking, of cutting, of editing, of doing it, putting it out, and then seeing, like, I remember my first being like, 5 people listen, and then they do it again and 5 people listen, and you go, oh fuck, yeah. Like I think it took like 9 episodes deep. I managed to get this guy Keegan Smith, who, if people followed Sonny Bill back in the day, they would have been familiar with him. He was kind of his trainer when he went back to the Roosters, and then also when Sonny was getting ready for the Rio Olympics to play sevens, and he was coming back from that injury. He went back to Keegan's place in Australia and trained with him. And so, like, when he came on, then it was like, oh, boom, we got an episode that went to 100, and that was like massive. But then if you've come into podcasting because you're listening to Joe Rogan and you know that he gets like 9 million in the moment it's released, well, then you're going to feel shit about that. But, he's up to what, 1,700 and something episodes, and you're on episode 1. Like, I think breaking it down that something like 80% fail after 3, another 80% fail after 20. They're like, if you're getting past that, then that's actually you're doing good. And yeah, to be a person to your word that, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this because I want to do this and enjoy the process of doing it, and I'm going to enjoy, learning all these new skills, learning about mics, learning about sound, learning about lighting, cameras and all that sort of shit. Well, then you're going to have fun with doing it, and whoever listens is going to be a byproduct. And like I always say to people, the ROI is the connections and the network that podcasting has made. But fuck, like if I was to go to somebody with the listeners, they'd probably laugh at me. And that's a problem in New Zealand. It's still such a new concept. Like the radio stations claim that they've got podcasts, but they're just bloody shitting out their radio show.
Yeah.
But,
I've
which
noticed
is good.
that. There's quite a few of those.
It's protecting their market, though, isn't it? It's like if you can
modernize.
Yeah, if you can flood the podcast network with all your radio shows, well then, if people look at charts of New Zealand, it's like, oh, Radio New Zealand's number 1, Bourgeois number 2, podcast or so and so on Talkback Radio is the highest rating podcast in New Zealand. That's just bullshit. It's just...
No, it's not a podcast. It's like, well, it's like taping the news and putting it on YouTube. It's like, oh, how many views have we got? Like,
we're the highest viewed YouTube channel in New Zealand.
Yeah,
our on-demand channel. Like, no, you're not. It's people not engaging with you. Well, it's still people engaging with your product, but it's...
And it's just the whole purpose of a podcast, because like podcasts in a lot of ways is just it's a lot like pirate radio back in the day, where it's like it's unregulated. You say what you want to say, like there's nobody is censoring you, nobody is telling you what to say, how to say it, what agenda to push. Where there is with these things, I mean, well, it's all the same shit. Like, it's a different kind of media, but the thing is still the same. Whether it was, printed newspaper, online newspaper, now we're on radio, now we're on podcast. But it's the same. The same approach. Somebody's still regulating it somehow. And I think with podcasts, it kind of gave us a platform where. I think this is why, like the whole thing with Joe Rogan, I think this is why he's so popular. It's just because he, and that's why, he's the controversial guy, because he says what the fuck he wants. Like, nobody's telling him what to say. It's gonna fly with some people and not with others. But, but you can't stop that. It's internet.
Yeah, and he's, doing 3 hours every time, like 3 or 4 times a week sometimes. And you're going to find with hearing somebody talk for that long, things that you don't agree with. Now, does that mean that the whole content you should throw out the door and flush down the toilet? Well, you as a listener can choose not to bloody subscribe and have it show up in your app every week, or you can completely turn it off and that not be a factor. It's the same like with TikTok, Instagram, all social medias. If you like compare two people that live together, they're completely different.
Yeah.
It's the same with the way distributed media is. It's a subscription model. So if you don't like it, ignore it. But there's what has he got, like 10 million followers, subscribers or something like that, maybe even more than that. It's worth at least $300 million to Spotify. What he does.
And at the same time as well, like this is something that. He himself talked about, and a lot of the guests on my show so far. It's just the whole concept is like you don't need to go to these extremes where like if you've heard something you don't like, you don't have to like boycott the entire thing. You can just disagree with that thing, like because that's the most important thing. Like the two of us can have a disagreement. You can have one view, I can have another. Ultimately, we still may not come to an agreement, but. We can go to another subject and then agree on it. It's just it doesn't have to be such a triggering thing where it's kind of like, what, fuck it, I'm throwing everything out the window because of this one thing. It's just like it really gets to people. It's like, nah, that's it. It's all over. This one issue is the last straw. Fuck this, like, and that's how a lot of people treat these things. Somebody said something, that's it, cancel. Everything you've done, everything you ever stood for, we're going to boil it down to this one fucking point and we're going after you, Yeah.
And that's what I kind of find weird, like, hearing that from you and hearing from some of your guests. Like, there's the side of perspective, like, you growing up, what did you say, like, stealing food and just kicking around with your boys and, like, just fucking whatever. Whereas me growing up, like, in Invercargill, nothing happened. It was just like...
Fuck, did you grow up in Invercargill?
Yeah.
Why am I finding out about this only now? Damn.
Because I was interviewing you.
No, but I mean, damn. Yeah. When you say nothing happened, like...
Yeah. It's just like, go to school. I like that sport. I'll go play it, Yeah. I grew up in, like, semi-rural... for the first 4 years, sort of south of Invercargill, but that's just like going to kindy, so like whatever. And then like four onwards, out in a semi-rural thing, you just kind of like kick it around paddocks and go into the bush and jump on vines and play war games. Not having any idea what an actual friggin' war is. Dig holes, make huts in the ground.
That's crazy, man. Yeah. So like you're a bit of a country boy in that sense, right?
No. I said on another podcast that I was a country calendar kid, not a country kid.
Country calendar. Yeah. Well, see, nonetheless, I think what's cool about this is we, like, you and I obviously have had very different, like radically different upbringing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it's cool to be able to sit down and just kind of bring your experience, bring my experience, chop it up. See what's what. You learn from these things. I think that, like, again, like, it's like my guest Pablo said, these things, when you share your stories, like, it connects you more than separates you.
Yeah.
When you share these things, when you don't just look at it as like, oh, he's different than me. I'm not going to talk to him, but I'm going to look at what I perceive as our differences, and I'm going to be like, ooh, I can't associate with you. But when you talk, you're just like, nah, you know what, this is actually interesting. We can connect more than we can, like, divide ourselves on these lines.
Yeah, and like, for me growing up in Invercargill was like, when I was about 6 or 7, the ILT, which is like a licensing trust, is where you can't buy by alcohol at the supermarket because there's a licensing trust. But they take all that money and they build shit with it. So there's awesome facilities and stuff. So when I was like 7 years old, they built a brand new swimming pool that was Olympic size, and they had hosted the national championships. And it was just after the Atlanta Olympics, and Daniel Loader shows up, and he was just from up the road in Dunedin. And it's like, there's this dude that's won 2 Olympic gold medals swimming in the bloody pool, and you're like, shit hot. He lives just up the road in Dunedin. I've been to Dunedin. Like, awesome. I reckon I could be an Olympian. You didn't and there's no one to tell you that that's not what you couldn't do, because that dude right there won 2 of them in an event that he hadn't even been proficient in up until leading up to the Olympics. And it was like, that was amazing. That was buzzy ass. But so then it's like, being a swimmer, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to swim and do the Olympics. I'm going to go to school and I'm going to like muck around in my backyard and whatever. And you got rugby on the TV. You got nothing to worry about, and you just carry on. And so then you go, well, how does someone be an Olympian? And I think I was quite lucky. My dad coached rowing, and so he was like, that coaching mentality. Well, if you want to get better, you got to do all these things. You got to be consistent. You got to train. And so it was like, oh, okay, I'll be consistent. I'll train. Same when being like 12 years old and seeing my brother get his eyes tested. I'm like, that's a cool thing. How do you be an optometrist? And it's like, well, you study science and maths, you get enough English credits to get into uni, you go to uni, you get into optometry, and then you finish the course. And like, it was both like a blessing and a curse, but my downfall was like, it's just like the process, but there was a little bit of knowing how to study in between. And I don't know whether that was NCA or whether it was coming to Auckland and, bright lights. I was driving in tonight, and my car is not quite new enough to have Bluetooth for it. So of course I got the little like radio transmitter, but there's too many friggin' radio stations in Auckland, so it just makes it all fuzzy. But then you like flick it over to George FM, and I was like, that thing that's on TikTok about tell me you're something without telling me you're something, and it's like George FM blasting out Lee Matthews' Sky Tower in the distance, the Harbour Bridge, and like that pink runway up there. Like, tell me you're in Auckland without telling me you're in Auckland, listening to George FM and
the big city, the
seeing
big
those
city
lights.
too.
So yeah, like I didn't know how to study, so I didn't get in, and but it was like I nearly gave up on it, but I don't know what it was. Something clicked that year. I wanted to be an optometrist, so found another path, did a Bachelor of Science, and came back, and 4 more years up here. So pretty familiar with Auckland, which is a weird thought growing up in Invercargill, because you like watch Spates ads of like trying to find the perfect woman. Dad's got a box at Eden Park, they've got a yard and all this jazz, and then the old bloke's like, does she drink Spates, mate? And he's like, no. And there's like, and they crack a beer, and it's like hard road finding the perfect woman. So you got like that vibe, the Jaffa vibe, like just another fucking Aucklander.
And I mean, like I feel like once I kind of started getting out into, outside of Auckland, the rest of New Zealand, you do notice that. You don't notice it when you're here, but when you get out, you do.
Well, that's the thing, like being from Invercargill in Auckland, there was no hate towards Invercargill, like. The odd person, with their clicks, but that's just, people's clicks. That's more about the fact that they've got a click and you're not in it than you're from Chicago.
But I mean, like you mentioned, you kind of, you didn't get to kind of crack it into the whole optometry thing right away, but you still kind of managed to overcome that.
It was.
I like that.
And it was like, I didn't give up either, because it was like pretty much straight away evident that fuck, you've blown it. So I the first 2 exams were 40% multi-choice. Weighted 40%, and they were multi-choice, and it was for chemistry and human body systems. And I attacked it like I had NCA, like kind of read over my notes, and I was like, yeah, I get that. I was in the lecture, I wrote some things down. And then it's, like 5 options, and you think 3 of them could be correct, and you're sitting there going, oh shit. And then, someone in the hall tells you, oh, the results are out, I got A, I got 90 90-odd%. They're trying to get into medicine. And you're like, sweet, go up there, and then you see 49 and 50, and you go, oh, fuck. Oh, that's not good. I need a B+ average, and I've just blown almost half the paper. And so, yeah. And then, I had a whole bunch of shit go down. I think I had hit self-destruct mode, basically. Went out on the piss. The girlfriend,
how old were you at the time?
18.
Oh,
Dumb as hell.
Yeah.
I had, in my 7th form year, I'd had a long-distance relationship with someone in Christchurch. So, that was, you think you're old and know what you're doing. You probably could have done that differently. And I was still with her. And then, the weekend before, there was... I wouldn't say accuse her of cheating on me, but it was a bit sketchy. So, like I said, had a bit of
dramas, man.
Yeah, had a bit of self-destruct, and I ended up getting kicked out of the hall, and it was mayhem. But that was like a real kick up the ass. What the fuck are you doing? Yeah, I was actually retelling the story to my work colleagues and then my girlfriend. I remember being up at my mate's hall up in Grafton. And I had a small bottle of Galliano, the licorice
liqueur. Yeah, the liqueur.
And when I lighted it on fire, of course, got carried away with that, and so it was gone. Yeah. And then we came down to margaritas, and then I was walking back home.
Margaritas is no longer around, is it?
I'm not surprised. It's shit-o.
So how old are you now?
I'm 33.
33, yeah. See, my margaritas were still around when I went clubbing. I mean, I'm 30, so we're not too far apart. But yeah, that was pretty much everybody's first clubbing experience, margaritas. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's one around the corner more. That was still there in 2013. I can't remember. That was more of a backpacker bar.
Oh, Globe.
Globe, yeah.
See, there's the other one. Yeah, you had margaritas, Globe, and Med and Code.
Yeah, that's the one.
So yeah, those were your first experience as the clubbing virginity in Auckland City, yeah.
Well, especially for the halls, it was kind of you go to margaritas on a Wednesday night, $2 jugs, and holy heck, tequila's $3. Yeah, so I think I'd got in, and then walking home, decided to have a seat. There was a big car park between Shortland Street and Fort Street, and so there's some steps down into this car park, and I think I decided to have a seat there, and one of the gentle homeless people woke me up. So I carried on back to the railway station when that was a hall of residence. Yeah, where I had to bide my time before I could go up to Grafton. Yeah, so that was shit. And I went up there having to prove that I wasn't all bad and studied better and learned how to study a little bit. And nearly got in and got on the wait list. So the wait list was about 30 deep, and I was position 26. There was 50 positions available, and the admissions lady said, we expect half the people we've offered optometry to decline because they would have got into medicine. So people I think they list their top 3 or 4, medicine, pharmacology, optometry, and nursing, and all that sort of stuff. And so if someone gets into medicine, obviously they're taking medicine, and so then that person drops out. And so I was 26th, so about halfway. And I didn't find out till Waitangi Day that I hadn't got in, so I had 2 weeks before the start of uni to decide what the heck I was going to do. And I just was tossing up between engineering in Christchurch, like my brother was doing, or carrying on with biomedical science in Dunedin. And there was I'd met a girl at summer, and she was going to Otago, so that probably paid a little bit of I'll go to Otago. But also that actually the reason why you went to the other end of the country is because you wanted to do this thing, and the shortest route to getting in is actually just doing a Bachelor of Science, finishing what you've started, so 2 more years, and going through. So again, that transition was a bit reckless. Dunedin, go straight into a week of O week, and then the second week's lectures, but that's still O week. And then I got glandular fever. But by the third year I was like, I'm going to work at the Cook. If I work out, so then I'll be out with people, and I won't miss out on hanging out with people, but I won't be getting drunk. But there's still the problem of finishing work at 3 a.m. and having a couple of jugs and some greasy food and going to sleep at 5 o'clock. And all that comes with that. But yeah, it was a bit better, and I'd been good at anatomy, good enough that they entered me into the pre-honors course for anatomy. So again, I learnt more like research and study skills doing that course, but I was no good at genetics. So I went from biomedical science and reproduction and genetics to anatomy, doing like neuroanatomy, cellular anatomy, and reproductive anatomy still. So yeah, that was where I sort of developed this like holistic brain endocrine function, and then looking at the eyes. So it was good, and it was good enough to get in. They interviewed me on the phone, and it was like probably the most nervous I've ever been in my life. Like I was shaking, and then I like hung up the phone, and I just had like real sweat patches.
Yeah,
I was like
just sitting there schwitzing, like, oh my god, like, you know, if you like measure your own pulse and whatnot.
Yeah, because it was, what was that, like 2009, it wasn't Zoom or anything, it was just literally on the phone with a conference call at the other end, like 3 people sitting in a conference room.
Yeah, like you're on loudspeaker.
Yeah, and I'm sitting at my kitchen table, you know, in the middle of the summer, like packing myself, hoping I say the right thing, and then they'll let me in as a postgrad. But yeah, they did, so that was handy.
That's cool, man. I mean, it's interesting hearing stories like this as well, because I mean, obviously you've had a quite a different path to like what I had, you know, because I got into these things a lot later in life, and I like because of that I found it, and like in comparison, because you know I hear stories like this, in comparison I found it a lot easier, because I was just like, you know, I was going in, I knew exactly what I was doing, like the nerves weren't really there.
I knew what I was doing. I knew what I wanted. I did, yeah, that's different,
yeah,
isn't
see,
it?
that's a bit different, yeah, because like we you know, you always feel like you know what you want, but like how you approach it is different. Like when you're young, you're like, fuck, you know, like how does, you know, you're still learning how, you know, how the real world works in a lot of ways, and you know, like interacting with adults, not in terms of, you know, like as your teachers or as your parents, like these are people you got to kind of level with at this point. You know, you got to convince them as if they're your peers. You know, so that's a bit different at that point. You're like, it's like, holy shit, like I'm supposed to kind of somehow fly on that same level, and that's not the same. When you're a bit later in life, it's a bit more straightforward. You know, like you just kind of, I don't know what it is. I actually thought about it the other day. It's like, what changes? Like at which point do you go from, you know, allowing adults to kind of treat you as, you know, like this, you'll take anything that goes, to just at a certain point saying like, nah, fuck off. Like I can hold it down myself. Don't tell me what to do. I'm an adult,
bro.
Yeah, like where that point comes, because I feel like it doesn't come straight away. It's not just because you're out of school, you know, like it doesn't come so naturally. It's not just because you're out here, because you can still talk your shit when you're like 18, 19, but it's not the same
Nothing
level.
grounded in it.
Yeah, like,
well, like even being a postgrad, like there was 2 other girls in my class who were postgrad, having done a 4-year degree, but they were quite anxious types. And then there's another couple of postgrads that had done 3-year degrees, and like everyone else that's undergrad is like just packing themselves, like, because you know they've still got that mentality that it's A+ or nothing. Like, you know, there's a fair chunk of people in optometry course that are Korean and Korean females, and of course there's just like, so, you know, I can't even understand how much pressure they were under just for the mark. But when it actually comes down to it, you've got to be a practitioner when it comes to the real world. So that, you know, is good, but it doesn't really matter. And yeah, like having a balanced life, you know, trying to have a conversation in uni, like, what did you do on the weekend? Like, what are you talking about? I studied, man. You're like, yeah, good. Whereas like us playing rugby, would host parties, you know, would go out, all that sort of stuff, you know.
It always makes you think as well, like this whole, you know, I suppose it's actually quite a cultural thing for a lot of various cultures. Like I wouldn't say it's one culture exclusively. It's multiple cultures that kind of place a lot of value on, education and performance within it and marks and just this whole sense of achievement, which like doesn't always translate into real world results. Like I went to school with people like that, where there was always this pressure from the parents. Like they were the ones that weren't showing up to the parties. They never went anywhere. They were always at home. They were always doing really well in the exams, and they would kill themselves before these exams. Like they would just go hard like all day every day. And then when we kind of grew up, it really didn't translate into anything. Like at best they became some sort of academics, but again, it's just kind of, they went to uni and kind of never left. They went from studying there to maybe teaching someone, but they never did anything with it. If it was medicine, well, not even medicine, but like say some sort of like engineering or science, they just ended up doing it in a very theoretical field. They never ended up achieving anything in it, despite the fact that there was all this pressure on them. So that's where I have this issue with
formal education,
well, formal education, and just the the amount of the value like placed on that. Like probably from my parents as well. Like the way they kind of presented it to me back in the day was like like, this is the shit.
They both studied, right?
Yeah. I mean, my father has a double degree in engineering and law. And both of these are pretty complex fields. So to me, I was like, whoa, like he's super smart. And it's just like, so from him, it was always just like, this is the stuff. You want to make it in life, that's what you need. And the more I did it, the more I realized it wasn't true. I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it's because of the generational change. I'm not saying that, he was always wrong. Maybe he was right for his time. Maybe something's changed.
And then also think about that is via them doing that, then they set it up for us. Like, for example, with my parents, my dad was the first, and my mum were the first to go to university. They both studied sciences. Dad became a teacher. My mum became a lab technician at the hospital, so testing all the bodily fluids for junk. And then me and my brothers have all done professional degrees. And so my younger brother's a surveyor, my older brother did chemical process engineering, and he sort of did various engineering escalating jobs to then being like a product manager for Sinlay, and then now he's a general manager for Dairyworks. And with being, again, had a formal education element with working in that product manager job with Sinlay. They put him through an MBA, and with that then he became general manager of a subsidiary. And it's but he's the same guy that needed to do maths twice to get in, and then when he was in, needed to do fluid dynamics twice to carry on. And the biggest irony of that is he ended up working at Waddy's in Hastings trying to pump tomato sauce up a hill. And I was like, aren't you glad you did fluid dynamics twice? And then working with, thousands of liters of milk trying to dry it out and make milk powder. Aren't you glad you did fluid dynamics twice?
I think it's just something that it's more I feel like formal education is more of a social norm than what it actually claims to be. I mean, that's from my experience anyway. I've studied, I've gone hard, I've kind of, I've went a lot further than I imagined I ever would, because, back in the day, nobody thought I would amount to shit. I wasn't getting university entrance at the end of school. I failed last year. Everybody was trying to get into university. I was, going down a totally different path. And
did you get some credits out of what you were doing, or?
Fuck all, it was useless. It did nothing for me ultimately, because I've already mentioned this in the previous episodes, but I tried to go to university. I think I was about 24, 25 when I was applying. And there's this whole criteria after 24. They kind of give you a pass to say, we don't care about your high school anymore. But even then, they're like, you might need to do foundation because we think you'll have trouble with academia. I was just like, I'm not going to fucking spend half a year proving to you that I can read and write. Yeah. So I went to another university, got in, and, I went just fine. But ultimately, I haven't gone through that. Then going into postgrad, then getting through that, and going through my professional development to where I am now. all I can say is everything I've learned doesn't seem to apply anywhere, but the little piece of paper that I got from it got me through the door. So that's what I mean about it being a social norm, is it didn't set me up to succeed in what I'm doing. It just allowed me to enter that field. That's it. It got me through the door. And even then, it's kind of like a debatable thing, because if you don't have the right kind of approach, if you don't network, if you don't present yourself in a way that fits with this particular organization or whatever, you're not really going to get in. It doesn't matter what kind of piece of paper you got, because there's plenty of people out there with it. But yeah, ultimately, it gets you in. That's it.
Yeah. And that's like where my thing is, like a protected profession, you definitely need the piece of paper. You can't get the registration if you don't have the piece of paper.
Yeah, it's more the red tape thing.
So that's the red tape. But then it's like, I've got to be careful how much I say, but like I haven't signed any NDA with my employer, but it's kind of one of those situations where if they gave a shit, maybe they should have, but it's kind of endemic of what I went through in the last year. It was like, I graduated, went through the graduate program, worked for Specsavers, and these guys offered me a job, got me out of my graduate obligations with Specsavers, and I worked for them for 2.5 years. And in that 2.5 years, I'd sort of, was knocking on the door being like, how do I, become a director with you guys? And nothing ever came of it. And then it was like, my ex and I were getting itchy feet to go overseas. Nothing was happening there. A mate of mine in Hawke's Bay had said, we'll be looking for someone in a couple of years. And I was like, right, we'll take the advantage. Now, we have my daughter, but we still went over to Australia. And like, that was a good experience. So I had that graduate experience with Specsavers in a corporate environment. Then I had these 2.5 years with this group in the Waikato. And then I went over to Australia, and I got to see kind of like the Australian model of optometry, which is partially funded. So they have Medicare over there, which partially funds their eye exam, often partially funds like testing and glasses. And then many people as well have private insurance. I think you get a bit of a tax break if you have personal health insurance in Australia. Otherwise, you have to pay like a 10 grand fee. So you might as well have health insurance type thing over a certain income. And this was in the Northern Rivers, just south of Byron Bay. So people were sort of retired there and had insurance and stuff. So it was like pretty good. But then I also went in Landon Hour, and that was like the beef capital of Australia. So that was a bit more rural hub and completely different socio-economic class. And that practice was completely dependent on Medicare. So not a lot of cash changed hands, but people were sort of brought back in with the minimum recall that you could do possible to get that code again type stuff. Like there was a lot of wasted resource going on there. And I was like, that's an interesting model, but in order to work within that model, you needed to kind of be a bit creative in how you recall people. But then at the same time, because no one was paying for anything, people came back. So it was a real weird structure that like people were coming in for things they didn't need, but at the same time, because it was free, they came in, and I was like, this is weird. So I had that experience, and at the same time, the people that owned the practice were in this business model where they're just trying to accumulate a bunch of optometry practices to then either put on the share market or have one of the insurers go, hey, we'll own you. So it was like a buy them up and then flick them on type job.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like it was about business. It wasn't about helping people at all.
So they didn't give a shit. Yeah. Like the practice that I had in Ballina where I lived, I was sitting around doing nothing for ages. I'd have like 2 or 3 patients some days. It was boring as hell. So I did a lot of reading and a lot of listening to podcasts and stuff like that time. But I managed to learn some of the specialty clinic skills. So like hard contact lenses. They had some equipment, so I was able to like look at things like macular degeneration and glaucoma. And like I said, I had lots of time to read lots of research articles. When I left New Zealand, I started looking at like ketogenic diet and how that works. So I started like reading lots about like diet wars, like fucking vegans versus carnivores, low carbs, high carbs, low fats, like just going through the gambit, like people hating on statins, people being like super passionate about statins, being like, what truly is a cardiovascular risk factor?
You've done a lot of self-development.
I had lots of
Yeah.
time, like I said, so I was just like deep in this whole like trying to understand the human body system, and then because the eye, just you can see those blood vessels, you can see like what's a cardiovascular risk factor. You're asking people what their medications are. Pretty much all of them have a side effect that is to do with, like it says, vaguely blurry vision. Like, what does that mean? Like, lots of people reckon that statins cause cataracts, but it's like, well, is it the metabolic dysfunction that causes the cataract? Lots of people, there's a pretty close association with people on statins and dry eye and people on statins and macular degeneration, but they've got a fucked metabolism, so you're going to have shitty stuff going on with oil production and shitty stuff going on with metabolic function in the eye. So it's like, yeah, I'm not convinced it's that, but they appear to, in some people, reduce that risk of a heart attack. So what do you want to do?
Well, see, it's interesting. So you've done all of this research to kind of find that out. So let me ask you this. Compare what you've learned on your own, like just kind of what you went out and did your own research versus what you've learned as part of your formal education. Well, first of all, are they both useful or is it just one? And second, with the formal education, do you feel like this was more, was it more than what I've described? Because from my end, it's obviously a different thing. It's business, it's marketing, it's communication. It's it's a different field. With medicine, it's a lot more kind of. I feel like it's almost a bit more factual, a bit more applicable than
it's
what
like
I've
foundational understanding, and so like, and then trying to communicate it is the tough part. Like, I can listen to an Andrew Huberman podcast and just be like, oh yeah. And then like today I was listening to Andrew Huberman talk to Rhonda Patrick, and when they like communicate like health advice, they do it very well. It's very layman, but I kind of like listened to that 2 or 3 hours expecting them to go into some intense study, but they didn't just they both acted like when they're guests on podcasts, which is actually when I find them quite good. But when you kind of listen to their podcasts individually, they just go on and on about these like micro datas, and so I just struggle to listen to it because if you're talking about data, I like to like see the table and delve into it, like the same way that they like to communicate it. They talk about that. Oh, I love reading the method, and I love looking at the actual stats and checking out that statistic.
Are they academics?
Yeah, they're both PhDs. I think Huberman's a professor.
Yeah, see, I think this tells me a lot about that, because I mean, see, that's one of my main beefs with academia in general. Like when I was in university, especially when I was studying public relations.
Yeah,
because it's one of those subjects where it's hard to kind of make it into a factual science because it's very people dependent. I think psychology would probably explain public relations better than public relations would.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have all these academics to sit there and tell you this is what's right. Yeah. We've done the research. We wrote a big ass article that you all need to read, and I've got a paper saying I'm the man, so this is what public relations is. And I'm just like, well, there's a lot of shit I'm disagreeing with here. You're trying to teach me this, but I know that when I go out, this isn't going to work like that.
Yeah.
It works different for different people, but I'm just like, I'm the kind of person that calls bullshit because I see through it. I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but at the same time, that's just what happens. And that's where I had a lot of clashes with a lot of my lecturers and whatnot.
Yeah. The same in the podcast space. Like I've been having some discussions about people in sponsorship. So like on my podcast, I've got a couple of discount codes. I've got some referral codes, but like they're not sponsorship. And it's like you talk to a business or you propose like sponsoring a podcast, and people like look at you weird. Like what do you even mean? What even is a podcast type stuff? And so talking with a couple of guys about, I've approached this company about sponsorship, and I've said to a few of them, you've got to remember that these marketing types are fresh out of marketing executives, fresh out of university, learning some metrics from a university that's probably 5 or 10 years old, and it's not even a model of how I market a business.
And when it comes to that as well, it's just like the world at the moment moves way too fast for that. You know, like in PR, they're still talking about print newspaper and how that. I'm just like, dude, we are so past that.
Yeah.
You know,
have you seen old mate on TikTok that used to be a ice hockey player? He was from Canada or States, went over to Europe for a little while, came back, thought he was going to have a contract and didn't have a contract. So basically his hockey career was over. And he's basically created a marketing company on TikTok doing like TikTok advising for TikTok marketing. And it's like, out of that, you've got this new medium where someone's created an advisor. And I'm going to be honest, that cunt definitely doesn't know.
Well, it doesn't. That's the
Are
thing.
You breaking the algorithm all the time? Like your standard thing, and then you post the exact same thing, and you're like five views. You're like, nailed it this time.
Yeah, and it's like that too when it comes to a lot of these things. It's not a factual thing. It's not something that's set in stone because it's, you know, you go out into the real world, you can break everything what like this established PR, PhD professor just told you was, you know, the ultimate undisputed truth. It's just, you know, like a new trend comes along and that's it. Your shit's gone out the window. Nobody reads newspapers anymore. Now what? You know, they like the journal articles that we read. And you got to remember, like I was doing this last year, so it wasn't that long ago. You know, it was during this COVID era that, you know, we reading academic journal articles and they talk about social media, how it's like, oh well, we still don't see it as a, you know, as a legitimate tool for public relations. It's still a new area. We just basically don't take it seriously. It's a piece of shit. We'll talk about newspapers instead. You know, it's better. This is what we did back in my day. And it's like, man, like this shit is so outdated. Like,
yeah. Meanwhile, you open the TikTok hack and the first screen is get your COVID vaccination. You're like, oh yeah.
Well, there you go.
That must be so ironic being like, oh yeah, because this will never work.
Exactly. You know, so I mean, like a lot of these things, just, you know, they move too fast for academia to adjust. But you know, these guys really kind of believe their own stuff.
Yeah. And like going back to where I was going, so like had that year, then I went down to Hawke's Bay, 2 awesome years with those guys. Like I wanted to stay there, but I'd separated from my ex and my daughter was up here, and so I just like couldn't stay in Hawke's Bay and keep driving 4 hours each way every second weekend, and also not see my daughter. You know, seeing her every second weekend was heartbreaking. But then I had been in discussions with this company about another group of practices, about them sort of buying it with me and me kind of running it and having a share in it. And like that fell through. They decided on buying some other practices. But then they're like, oh, hey, we've got this opportunity in Tokoroa. The guy's retiring. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. Like, you know, if we can talk about shareholding and stuff like that. And they were like, oh, yeah, we'll get, like, how do you practice and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, this is all the things I've been doing. Like, we need this piece of equipment to do it. And they're like, yeah, cool, we'll do that. Fucking nothing. Just like empty promises. Like, on Fridays it'd be good Fridays or Mondays it'd be good if I could work in Hamilton. I think I work in Hamilton twice. And then another 2 times I had to work in Te Awamutu. And I'm like, Te Awamutu is not Hamilton. It's like, I'm going to Pukekohe or Gordonton. Like, you know, so that I can pick my daughter up at like 5:30, not 6:30. You know, it's just so fucking frustrating. And then, you know, I've got all these like experience. Like this is my 9th year officially practicing as a professional, and you do 2 years of practice in university as well. So I've done like 10 years, and they're just like, you know, you try give some feedback on how we can do shit better, and they would just basically tell you to shut up and don't worry about it. And you're like, what the hell? And it was like, whereas like, oh, you know, especially with the diabetic clinic that I've been doing today, like people have been like, holy fuck, I've never heard any of that stuff before. Like they tell the girls at the front, like, that was amazing, I never had that before. And like you do all these extra tests, oh, I've never done this before, you know, and you like change their mind around what they're getting out of their eye care. But it doesn't matter because you work for someone, you know, and the person that you answer to is a middle manager, and then they answer to another manager, and then it's like the directorship. It's just like so frustrating. So I'm super excited to be like what I do being a reflection of the business, and that, you know, the business I'm going to has got awesome, what do you buy in a business? Goodwill. Like, it's got awesome goodwill, but it's going to be cool to put my own part on that and create that, you know, what I do and how I see the practice as, you know, an extension of the body, not just a fucking eyeball, and, you know, have that mean something and that be where I take optometry. Because, like, the history of optometry is like a apprenticeship in spectacle making. You know, people used to go over to the UK and become certified spectacle makers, and then they, as part of the School of Psychology, back to what you were saying about PR, like, same with optometry, it's really about a relationship with a person and assessing their needs and wants and limitations and trying to solve it. So out of the School of Psychology became the optometry degree. That was very much about diagnosing refractive error, so the needing for glasses, and seeing things in the eye and going, they had to be real PC with what they said to the ophthalmologist, but it was basically like, you know, you saw what you saw, but do you think that it is this? Would you look at that, please? Yes, sir, thank you, Mr. Ophthalmologist. Yours sincerely, you know. And now then they kind of got some diagnostic tools, so the ones that were already existing had to do a lot of study, get another piece of paper. So the guy I'm working for has got 3 like different certificates on his wall from Auckland University, because he got his optometry degree, then he got his diagnostic drops degree, then he got his therapeutics degree, and so he also wants to look at doing glaucoma certification. So there's just all this, you know, paperwork that you can rack up over time. But now with the like induction of AI and all these diagnostic machines, like we can, and the fact that central health is overloaded, ophthalmology is overloaded, you know, it takes 13 years to be an ophthalmologist, so there's a massive bottleneck in that, you know. I think optometry can do so much, and, you know, save vision, save lives, improve health outcomes and that sort of stuff. Like, when you go to the GP, you're lucky if you get 5 minutes, and these people have got 10 comorbidities, you know, but we've got 45 minutes, and we can, you know, ask them what their medication is and have a chat and talk holistically, and, you know.
Not like 5 minutes and here's some Panadol. Thank you.
Here's all your prescriptions again. Yep. That robot at the pharmacy will print them off for you, and you'll have your roll of medications for the next month.
Yeah.
No.
Well, see, it's cool what, like, you know, the way I see you talking about this is, you know, like, it's always nice to hear someone kind of talk passionately about what they do, but also, you know, like, you know, passion is passion. Like, it's all great. It's all, especially in the age of social media, it's always nice to parade your passion, to just kind of speak passionately, to show that passion to everyone. It's like, you know, that's so cool. But I think the most important thing that one can do with their passion is put some respect on what they do is, you know. So it's not like, you know, because to a lot of people, a lot of these things don't mean anything. They don't know about them because, you know, that's not what they do, you know. But like, if you can actually shine a bit of light and show them what these things are, how useful they can be. So it's not just like, oh, well, you know, great for you, you know, you've achieved something, you know, eyes, you know. But when you can explain just how important these things are and what they can do for us, I think that's the most important thing about someone's passion. It's being useful with your passion rather than just kind of parading it and just, you know, like, kind of virtuously signaling it into the world. So that I think that's what's really cool about, you know, about what you're bringing to the table with this.
And like, I think it's one of the things I really sort of honed in on with those first lockdowns is, like, you know, I just separated and I was away from my daughter, but I was like, well, what, you know, I could go into a cave and hide away and wallow but like, what can I control? What can I make this a good thing? And like, I enrolled in this course again, back to Keegan Smith. He was running some online conferences with strength and conditioning coaches and media coaches. Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy, was there. That's how I got introduced to him. And it was like that theme of like the world is shut down here, but we have this online opportunity here. What can you do? Like, how can you grow your audience? I think I've taken that Stag Roar platform. I've doubled it since the pandemic started. So about 1,000 now. It's cracked over the 2,000 mark. And that's all organic and slow. That's why it's taken 2 years, because it's slow growing. It's slowly chipping away at it. But it's like looking at those metrics, just talking about it. It's being consistent. It's always putting that podcast up each week. Always tapping like people that interest me and that I want to talk to, saying, hey, do you want to do it? It's, driving up to Auckland and having a chat with, I think I did 5 one weekend, and then now this weekend coming up and like talking to yourself, and I'm going to be talking to Hendo's Hot Topics tomorrow afternoon. Like, again, where I started off, it's good that you like follow through with what you say. There's another couple that I was supposed to chat with tomorrow morning, and I've driven all the way up here on my free weekend from Tokoroa, and that's fallen through, but it's all right. I know some people in Auckland. I'm going to catch up with them instead. But that real dedication to what you do is what's I respect a lot about you. Is you say something and you do something, and it's not hard, but sometimes it's difficult for people to follow through on it. And I think that's the same when it comes to health. Like the diabetic photo screening day that I did today, I'm hugely passionate about. As I said, when I was in Australia, I was diving into this war of like nutrition and diabetes, and holy fuck, it's actually reversible. Why are people getting so much comorbidity about it? Why is like 80% of the American population metabolically unhealthy, and something like 40% of them have diabetes? Why is that? It doesn't have to be like that. And in 2018, when I went over there was this conference in Sweden where they said, diabetes is reversible. In US, UK, and Europe, like put that into their diabetes associations. And then it's just happened in Australia in October last year. So I've sort of been joking with my patients that, New Zealand's usually 10 years behind the world. So if it happened in 2018, we'll get this information in 2028. However, we're usually 5 years behind Australia.
Slightly expedited here.
Yeah, so maybe 2026 we might start talking about diabetes reversal. But then I sort of, chalk and cheese be like, but we can be ahead of the health professionals in New Zealand.
Yeah,
we can take initiative.
We can spearhead the situation.
Yeah, because that's what like when it comes to especially like a metabolic condition like diabetes, it's like about taking responsibility for yourself. And like you've seen my social media, I'm big into Stoic philosophy. I would try and share one of those quotes most working days when I'm doing my journaling. And like I was listening to Gad Saad talk to Joe Rogan. He was talking about his new book and like wanting to delve into psychology, and he was basically saying everything that we've learned in clinical psychology and psychology study in the 20th century and now into the 21st century has been said by the ancient Greeks like fucking thousands of years ago. It's like all of psychology is just Stoic philosophy repurposed with a bit of neuroscience involved.
It makes you think, it's almost like, well, why were they talking like that? I wonder if they just had like so much free time that you could sit down and kind of delve into yourself and figure these things out. Because a lot of them are like that. A lot of them you're not really going to get by testing or some other shit. You just really need to kind of sit down and look within yourself a bit more.
Yeah, like Marcus Aurelius was groomed by Seneca to be the emperor and be the Caesar. But like when you've got the Roman Empire and you're sitting there in Rome, like you've got the Senate and you've got there's the dark side of it. You've got slaves and they're probably up to some questionable stuff all around. But they're probably looking at what they were doing and a little bit of ashamed by a lot of their behavior, and like we're trying to self-diagnose the human condition, which is what you go and do when you have therapy, is kind of talk out your behavior and your thoughts, and then the psychologist or the psychiatrist or coach, whatever, will kind of relay back to you, say that again, like figure it out type kind of stuff.
Try to analyze it and potentially reframe it.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is this particular kind of activity for me, right? It allows me to do something that I usually otherwise don't feel like I'd be able to, because I really got into the whole personality type thing, right? So the whole introvert versus extrovert.
So do you know your personality type per se?
Yeah. So I'm an architect. I am INTJ.
INTJ.
So I'm introverted, intellectual, thinking, judging.
So I'm a ENFJ. So I more extroverted. I thought I was quite extroverted until I met my old boss. So I'm like it's kind of a 65-35. But yeah, man, he'd be a 98. He's out there.
Yeah, see, to me that feels really weird. Like, I don't know how someone can do that. Like, to me, it just seems absolutely impossible. But doing this whole podcast allowed me to kind of have more conversations with people, because like, I'm not the kind of person that will show up at a party and just start talking to people. I hate that shit. I can't stand it. I hate small talk. I'm gonna show up at a party, I'm gonna find that one person that I know in this whole party, and I'm gonna go stand next to them.
But that's what you say about the podcast thing. As like a reasonably extroverted person, especially when I showed up to Hawke's Bay and got exposed to two like really extroverted people, and I was doing this podcast having 1 to 2 hour deep conversations, and my ex was quite introverted, and I had a young daughter, so we were like pretty, had moved to new places twice, so we were pretty like sheltered off, basically in our home, and I'd go for walks with my daughter all the time. I was like, oh, maybe I'm an introvert. We'd go on and do a Myers-Briggs, is that what it's called?
Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, and we're like, nah, extroverted. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But then I was like, oh, this addresses my like little 35% introverted conversation. But then from like a high introvert, it's like, oh, well, I've got to like put myself out there and engage with brand new people.
Exactly, and it's interesting because the whole thing is obviously a spectrum. None of it is like a hard criteria. I think this is where a lot of people misunderstand these tests. When they say, oh, someone's introvert, they say, oh, well, you can't be anything else. And it's like based on the situation. Like, if I need to be extroverted, if I, like, as part of my work, I have to kind of make decisions, I have to talk to people, and I have to be quite often I have to be relatively forward and stern about these things. That's not an introverted side of me, but because my job requires that, I can step out of that. But my default that I revert to, like, if I'm just left alone, if I'm chilling, like, I'm happy being by myself and just kind of alone with my own thoughts. But I think this is what's cool about doing this podcast, is it allowed me to kind of get out of that kind of mind frame, while at the same time not kind of compromising myself. Because I got to the point where I'm just like, I'm embracing the fact that I'm an introvert. I'm no longer trying to kind of combat that by getting myself out. So like, I don't need this. Like, I get nothing out of it. I really don't. Like, I don't feel any happier or that I've achieved something if I go against that and try to be sociable. It does nothing for me. It just makes me tired, right? I get home and I'm just like, I need to recharge my social batteries. But doing this, like, allows me to kind of have these conversations, to learn something, to develop kind of a more genuine connection with other people while still feeling comfortable doing that. Like, that's what I find really curious about these whole personality types, right? When I recently started in my new role, I have a team of people that I lead. Like, that's the first thing I did, is I made everybody do a personality test. It's just like, I want to know who we got here. And it's really interesting because that actually helped me a lot. I figured out who the guys were that just kind of, they wanted to get the order and get shit done. They don't want the initiative, but wind them up and watch them go. And then you got others that kind of want to be heard. They want to be a bit more like, be taken into account and kind of made to be feel that they're included. So it's a crazy thing.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up the term social batteries there. I learned this off another introvert, Nick Batar. He hosts the Better Project, and he sort of gave it exactly like that. After you spend your social energy, then you need to get home and get time to recharge. Whereas for me, I wake up in the morning, I do my thing, and then I like attack the day, and it's just like doom, 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 doom. The more interactions I have, the more points I get. And so, yeah, it was like a really eye-opening, like that dynamic of what that sort of means. And it's funny you said about like finding the team and like what was in the team. I think that if the company I work for right now had realized my personality type and realized that that means that I want to be the commander, which is how they just describe it, ENFJ.
Actually, is that what the name for it is, the commander?
They wouldn't have hired me.
Yeah.
Like, they would have been like, that's a bad fit for what we want to do. Because, it turned into a massive personality clash.
Yeah.
And got, quite uncomfortable. And it was like, someone's on the phone telling you, pull your head in and or else you might want to look at elsewhere. Meanwhile, you've just been offered something, and it's like, right, I'll go elsewhere. Yeah.
It's funny. Do you think that, like, what do you think society would be like if we were all a bit more aware of that? Because I feel like, there's so many kind of facts and properties about ourselves that we try to portray. It's my religion, it's my ethnicity, it's my, club that I might belong to. It's all of these things that I attach to myself when I present myself to someone, and this is what they take me as. They're like, okay, I should act this way because of that feature of you. But what if we were to take these personality features? I feel like the world would be an interesting place. I feel like it could be a much better place as well.
Yeah. Have you done DISC? Because that like addresses your professional and your personal personality traits as well.
Nah, what's that one?
So you can I can't even remember what the I know D is dominant because I score high in that one. Yeah, but I can't. I think it might have been like intuitions. Yes, I can't remember what the other ones are. And depending on situation, it's like quite situational where you swing, and they can look at like how you'd be outside of work and within work, and especially with optometry being a very sort of like systematic approach to finding basically any possible reason for a problem. And then addressing that, you've got to be very analytical. And of course, you're answering to the health practitioners board, whatever it is, in New Zealand. So you're the patient that's sitting there is protected from you, to be flippant on it. And so you've got to cross your I's and dot your T's type thing. And so that sort of brings down your sort of dominance. You've got to really work with that power imbalance and try and empower the patient with that. So that's going back to that sort of psychology thing. It's very much it's someone's personal information and their health, and you're the one that in theory knows about it and can pick it up. But yeah, this DISC idea is quite funny that you sort of pivot and things. But I remember, again, personal development back in the graduate program of Specsavers, we did DISC then, and I had what the shape I have, as I said, quite dominant. And then they showed like what an optometrist is usually like, and everyone in that meeting, there's sort of half a dozen of us from around the country, had what the optometrist looked like, and then there was mine that was opposite, and I was like, oh, I don't see this the same way as you guys. I was like, I was just thinking to myself, like, that might be a problem.
It's interesting too, because like quite often you see these things being presented as like, oh well, it's almost like a barrier, right? Like you don't fit to be an optometrist. This is what an optometrist should be like, and you're something else.
Especially in a corporate environment.
Well, like especially that, yeah. But in saying that, like I feel like you can make anything your own. It's just going to be a different style. Like at the end of the day, we're talking about optometry here.
Yeah.
Like it's a very, in my view, it's a very practical thing. Where you can have a different personality as to how you approach it, but you can't have a different procedure because of your
Yeah.
personality. It's kind of like, you know, like the way you look at an eye doesn't change because you're an energetic extrovert versus being, you know, a quiet introvert. It's just, you know, I don't know, shit, you might whistle while you work, but, you know, at the end of the day, you're still going to do the same shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the whistling while I work person. That's probably my old boss, but no. And it's funny as you mature through your career, the people that you piss off change as well. Like, especially when I was younger, I ground up sort of late working age females. They didn't like me. I'd get a few complaints from that group, and then when I came back from Australia, all of a sudden it was like 80-year-old males that said I was like intimidating and arrogant, and I was like, oh fuck, what do I do? Turned out I was crossing my arms a bit and leaning back on the chair, and apparently that's a postural thing of intimidating,
arrogant, sitting there like this. No, I can see how that, you know, they can be a thing as well. And I mean, like when it comes to this whole like personality dynamic, I think it's important to not just kind of think about your own, but the other people's perception. And that's the harder part, because you know what you are. Yeah. But you don't know what they are, and you kind of have to try and pick it up on the fly. You have to read into it. You have to be conscious of it, and I think most people aren't. You know, like if you've read into it, if you kind of know at the back of your mind that, you know, these personalities are a huge part of us. You know, we carry this everywhere we go, no matter what we do. It's a bit easier for me to analyze that. Like when I'm interacting with someone, it's like, okay, I can see, you know, they might be extroverted. This person, maybe not so much. This person is more of a feeler. This person's more of a thinker. Yeah. You know, so you start to pick up on these things, but if you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You don't know what's going to trigger that response. You know, like with some old guy sitting there looking at you with your arms crossed, it's just like, oh, well, look at this guy. Thinks he's all that. Whereas someone else would have seen you as just like, you know, maybe, this guy's confident. He knows what he's talking about. I feel comfortable because of that. You know, so like this perception, you know, it'll differ amongst people. And I think if we're a bit more aware of what each of us is, you know, I feel like we just have a easier time in general.
And that's what was quite funny. Like I said, that one boss is very extroverted. The other boss that would go and talk to these people was a bit more introverted, a bit more analytical type guy. And he'd sort of come back to me and be like, there was no problem. He was like, but that's how they interpreted it, and this is how you interpreted it. Like, there was nothing really wrong and everything's fine. But that was just like an unmatched experience.
It's almost like a bit of a miscommunication in that sense. But you know, like I think miscommunication is not to be underrated. Miscommunication often is what can start major conflicts. It can start wars. You know, it's like literally that. Like you could have talked this shit out, but instead, you know, like you chose to kind of be like, nah, this is how I perceive it. This, you know, this hurts my ego. You have disrespected me because you've acted a certain way. The other person's be like, nah, I'm just being me. The fuck did I do? You know, like why are you being a dick to me for that? Like, are you saying I'm not good enough? You know, so like it creates these stupid dynamics when reality is, if we were a bit more aware of how the other person perceives these things, a lot of this can be avoided, right?
How you been dealing with it? Like it's so fucked up.
Well, I mean, I try to read a lot more, and read into people just to kind of try and be respectful of what their personality is and not try to push them in directions where they don't want to go.
I was meaning the war. How are you dealing with the war?
Oh, well, you know, like it's the same shit again. I mean, to be honest, it's very applicable to that because I see different people reacting differently to these things. You know, like I've made my position very clear on the whole subject. Like, I don't think anybody can be confused about it, but people still react differently to it. You know, there are people that have just kind of put their fingers in their ears and is just saying, nah, this is how it is. And because, you know, you're of this particular ethnicity and the world is saying that, you know, these are the bad guys, you're the bad guy, I don't want to hear nothing about it. And I'm just like, well, you know, like if you got your head up your ass, I can't get it out for you, you know, you do what you do.
So people coming at you or like...
Yeah, no, I've literally had a few people kind of confront me on that.
Fucked up.
Yeah, no, it is a bit like that, but I'm just like, you know, I'm with the shit. Like, you know, some people would be like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? It's so unfair. I've seen plenty of people handle it that way. People going on these rants on social media about like, this is so racist. Why am I responsible for this and all that? I'm just like, I don't give a shit. Like, you want to bring it to me? I'm all for a good debate.
Yeah.
You know, like let's bring the smoke. Let's sit down. Let's chop it up because I enjoy it. You know, and I think I enjoy it because I actually, you know, give the proper respect to the process of the debate. Like I don't get into the emotions.
So in that situation, do you feel that you're able to provide a perspective? Like, because, you know, in theory, it's Putin and his whatever his circle is, and that's the kind of thing that people like can't figure out how big is the Putin circle.
Yeah, but I mean,
and the fact that you know they're using the military to execute, you know, this Putin bloody circles initiative. You know,
it's kind of, you know, it's starting to get a bit messy because at the start we could, you know, you could say that at the start you could say, yeah, like he's got his own agenda. He's telling people what to do, but not why they're doing it. Because I mean, at the time, all these, you know, secret military operations, everybody's phones got taken away. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just like, okay, do this particular thing. You don't know why you're doing this. And at the time you could claim it, but at this point, you know, we've been at this for months now. A lot has happened. You know, you can see what the result of it is, and I think this is why, you know, the morale of some of the soldiers has kind of gone out the window as well. That's why it's become this mess that it has, because half the people don't want to be there. And yeah, but the brainwashing has gone to another level with it now. At this point, it's just kind of, you know, like, this is what it is. We tell you what it is. But, you know, you kind of have to look at the fundamentals of it and ask, what the fuck are you doing in another country? They're not invading you. You're not defending anything. You're attacking someone. So how do you justify that?
Yeah, and it's almost like the rest of the world's like, come on, Russian military, overthrow this guy. He's just one guy. You know, it's like that. That's how I like see the rest of the world acting. Like, oh, we're going to make it really painful for you as a country, so that hopefully they overthrow this guy. You know. Yeah,
I mean, well, no, look, my view on this, and again, this is another subject that somebody's tried to confront me on, is it's quite radical. Like, I think enough is enough. I think he does need to go. You know what I mean? And but the trouble is, I don't think there's actually a good way out of this.
No.
Not even if, like, you know, like even if he's to go down right now, you know, the war can kind of stop because there's no source. There's no, like, you know, mothership telling everybody what to do. But I think ultimately I wouldn't be surprised if Russia fell apart into fragmented into little pieces, because it's so huge. And everything is kind of centered around one city in Moscow, which is, you know, this modernized city. All the money's there. But then you have regions like, you know, for example, my own, like on the Far East, it's a 9-hour flight. We're really far away from there. You know, we're a world away. All the money still goes to the capital, you know, so people complain about that. Same goes for Siberia. So, you know, like when you think about it, if they didn't have to put all that money there, they'd say, you know what, fuck this. We got our own thing. We've got resources here. We got shit we can do. You know, Far East has logistics. It has the ports. Siberia has natural resources. We don't need to send this here. We can just cut ourselves off. We'll be our own thing, self-contained. So, you know, I can see that happening, but, you know, like,
it takes a united people, though, eh?
It does, and the thing is, at this point, it's not going to be that way. It's just too much of a mess for people to unite. Yeah. But, you know, going back to what you're asking about people kind of confronting me on these things, I think I think the most important thing I've learned from this is just to kind of, regardless of the fact of how people approach you, obviously read what they're about and understand that some people are not going to change their mind.
No.
I've had people that were just, when they got so mad, like especially some Ukrainian friends, they got so mad that just like you realize it's nothing's going to change. It's just, like this is very deeply rooted in them now. Like there's no going back, essentially, as sad as it may be. Like there's just, you're never going to change how they feel about your, as I said, properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like, I saw that in my granddad with Japan, being a teenager in New Zealand during the war, being worried that Japan was going to come here, like they're like not eating rice because, that's Japanese, and, these ideas of that, like New Zealand fought so we didn't have to be taken over from Japan. Now, who frickin' knows what that might have looked like? It wasn't gonna, look what it did try to do, but I don't think it was gonna like gentrify New Zealand to be Asian.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's what everybody is scared of.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's interesting you go into this point, right? This whole sentiment, it's still alive.
Yeah.
It's like, I would like to say that it's something that's, from an older generation. It was easier to pass this kind of stuff across, maybe because there wasn't social media, maybe because there was, what did you have? Newspapers, radios, and it's all pretty much the same thing. Whatever they say is your only
some
source.
of those cartoons back in the day were like far out. That's
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you can see why, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're here now. You have all your alternatives, but it's still here.
Yeah.
You still have this weaponized majority.
Yeah.
And I look at it and it's just like, this is almost like weaponized stupidity, and which is why a lot of this shit is happening. That is why an entire country like Russia can agree with what's going on next door.
Yeah.
They're not all for it, but there's enough people that they've convinced that this is right for that to be like the majority. And this is the same thing here. A lot of the issues that we have in New Zealand, so long as we can get all of the Karens and everybody else that kind of wants to jump on board and say, yeah, they said this is right, we say this is right, and that's it. We're the majority, and anything other is a fringe minority.
Demonized society. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And did you learn that from your journal articles?
No, but the funny thing is, I think that actually boils down to personality types, because a lot of these personality types, the more abundant ones, they're not as analytical about these things.
Yeah,
they don't give a shit. Like, I might kind of take this in and try to think it through.
You're an analyst.
Yeah, no, but it's one thing to kind of take these things in and think them through and try to process into something a bit more impartial and try to create an understanding, which ultimately ends up being a very gray area. It's never black and white, but the thing is, it's always presented as black and white, and many people accept that as such. And that becomes society. That becomes a majority. This is what we are. So my gray area is not mainstream. It's not something that people are willing to deal with. It's just easier to see it as black and white, to pick a side. Yeah.
One of my favorite words is nuance, and again, one of my favorite psychological concepts is Dunning-Kruger effect, where when you know a little bit about something, you have very high confidence in what you know.
Yeah, circle of knowledge. I remember we talked about this on your podcast, and you know what? Ever since you said that, I've actually repeated this to a few people a number of times, and the more I say it, it's just like, man, this is actually a very powerful concept.
Yeah.
When you actually realize that the more you learn, you realize the less you know.
Yeah, and the less confident you are in what you know.
Yeah, well. and that confidence isn't. I think the meaning of the word itself, confidence, isn't to say that you're not confident enough. That means you're not good enough. Because a lot of the time people think that to be confident meaning you're right. It's slightly different. It's more of a I know what I know. I come with this knowledge to you, but at the same time, I'm open to everything else. So, I might be confident. I might have more information than you do, and therefore, I might win this debate, but I also realize that another person can come along with more information than me, and then my point of view is not as valid anymore, because I have no choice but to learn this. The logic, the logic in me doesn't allow me to kind of have my head up my ass anymore.
Yeah. And that's where I think that like agreeability thing really is what confidence it is like, can you sort of back up the things that you say? And if you can't back up the things you say and something offers you someone, can you be receptive enough to understand that and take on board, or are you going to get defensive, or are you going to just like carol in fear and be like, oh, I was wrong, this
is not how I was raised, this is not my tradition, this is not my beliefs. This is where like I get annoyed at that kind of shit. It's just like none of the stuff that you value so much actually carries as much power as like simple logic does. Like if something makes more sense than the previous, roll with it. I'm not asking you to kind of become the next kind of big promoter of that particular point, but at least take it in. Like don't reject it just because it's different to what your values, beliefs, and traditions are. Yeah,
that's probably this one of the slow moving advantages of a progressive society that's intermingling. Like, I know in my family, and we were having a chat about this the other night with my mum and dad and my girlfriend, that how religion can butt heads, even when it's pretty much the same bloody religion, Anglicans versus Catholics.
Okay.
But 3 generations ago it was a big deal. 2 generations ago it was a consideration that it could be a big deal, and now it's kind of like my parents were saying that all 3 of us were raised Catholic. And now we're not really, church-going, God-fearing individuals. And I sort of piped up. I was like, yeah, we operate on, various spectrums of agnosticism. Like some sort of belief model that, we all sort of have this physics model. And Dad was a physics teacher, despite being Catholic. But it's like, that sort of unknown element versus this like physical thing is a tough thing to get you around with. And so you do have this like spiritual crisis of like, well, what is connection between people? What is the world? What is the universe? And like,
it's quite cool though. Like when you think about it, like if you take your dad as an example, right? If you kind of mix, say, religion and especially something like physics, it's a very factual kind of science. I think that collision is a good way to create some open-mindedness.
Yeah.
Because like you taking 2 contradicting things that you believe in, and you don't want to give either one of them up. But you don't want to give either one of them up, because it's like, well, look, I've learned physics, I work hard, I understand it, I can see the facts. On the other hand, I believe in religion. I came up with that, and this is something I hold very close, and like to a lot of people, like it does something for them. It adds value to their life. So when you collide the 2 of them, you realize that you can't kind of overcommit to any one particular point. And that's a good thing, because that means that you can take more information in. You're open. Yeah, you can be spiritual, you can be scientific, and you can be both at once without kind of having to say, nah, these guys are idiots, or these guys saying, nah, you guys are heathens, or whatever. Yeah.
And then like my family's like majority Irish, but like a little bit of it's very white, a bit of Welsh and Celtic, Scottish type, English type vibes. So it's like not much out of the British Isle. And then my older brother is married to someone with Dutch heritage. My younger brother is married to someone with Vietnamese heritage. And then you hear about the story of her mother, what she went through to get to this country, what sort of realms her father was under, what the sort of like Vietnam War was like, and how it like crushed this people and like again a horrible situation that we're sort of far removed from in Invercargill. And you go, oh, it's like there's different ways of looking at it, and you meld that together, and you again expand that open-mindedness and start to like have a different view of how things are going on. Like I said to you off here, listening to Calvin Davis this morning speak about early New Zealand, reading about early New Zealand, like I read this book that was called A Pioneer Looks Back, and it was talking about the 90s, being the 1890s in Taranaki clearing the land for dairy farms, and of course the interaction they had with the local iwi, and still land wars going on and military occupations from the British in Taranaki kicking people off land and stuff, and you're like, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off with that too, and it's like, on the one aspect, it's developed, one of New Zealand's dairy hubs in Taranaki, but on the other side it like cleared a whole bunch of land, it displaced people, it oppressed people, put them into poverty.
There was definitely a cost to it.
And you just go, yeah, that needs addressed. I don't have the fucking answer. I'm not a sociologist, but like, you can't just like be like, nah, move on.
Yeah, no, that's true, and and you can't. Yeah, when you take it like that, you can't kind of lean to one side or another. There's pros and cons to everything, and it becomes a complex situation.
Oh, yeah.
And a complex discussion to have, but a discussion that needs to be had regardless, because we do have to move forward somehow, don't we?
Yeah. And that's what's messed up coming from Invercargill. I had a kapahaka in high school. My primary school had a marae on the grounds. We had a marae and a church and a convent on our grounds. Like, it was, a weird situation. So, like, I knew about Māori culture, I knew about marae protocols, but I did, Ngāi Tahu's a big iwi. It's basically based in Christchurch. There's a Murahuku marae, there's a Bluff marae, but that was, in a place like Invercargill, that was kind of like kept to itself and kept secret. And I just had like a small glimpse to it. Interestingly, when it came to kapahaka, I won the best kaya in Southland twice, despite not having any Māori heritage. And like, I don't know if the judges knew that or what, but yeah, it was a weird place to be, to then not really have any clue of what went on and what, like, how land was divvied up in Southland and South Island. Kind of knowing that a lot of the properties in Queenstown and a lot of properties in Dunedin, or not so much Dunedin, but in Christchurch, are owned by Ngāi Tahu or Kaito. Again, I'm not sure which way you even say that. That's like the ignorance of it, growing up in Invercargill. And then you move to a place like the Waikato and you learn that there's like all these little sub-tribes and wars, and you pick up a book in a beach house in Whangapawa and read about Taranaki, and you're like, holy heck, I was never taught any of this. And then to see it on the news that people are so upset about the treaty versus Te Tiriti, and again, that was nothing that was introduced to me, knowing that Ngāi Tahu had settled early on, and go, I don't understand any of all of this, and then you just keep getting these drips, and you're like, oh, far out. Like,
I think that's what, this is why we are where we are, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
And anytime, I feel like anytime anybody tries to educate, it does get hijacked.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like,
on either side, there's always like an extremist on either side that kind of wants to push a specific agenda, but yeah, we just kind of end up swinging from one end to the other of that spectrum and can't meet in the middle because of those kind of extremes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so many topics, and yeah, I was laughing to myself on the way up, because like just south of Auckland, like around Mangatawhiri and stuff, there's a big Christian like Family First outfit there, whereas in Tokoroa there's like a big Christian developer. You see none of those Family First signs, but you do down there. I'm like, what's it with the Christians down here that they're so on that end of the spectrum, like Family First, like killing babies type stuff, whereas the rest of the country you don't see it.
All anti-abortionists.
Yeah,
no, see again, like hot button issue, that one, with what happened in the US recently. Yeah. All that kind of stuff. Again, yes, there is that side, but then there's the other side.
Yeah. And then that's probably, when you look back at New Zealand, where we're quite lucky, we are quite centrist. It's a battle, and it's getting worse because of, this is the downside of internationalism, is like you see a bipartisan country like the US that like dominates the media.
That we often kind of model ourselves after. Yeah. They have a huge influence on our culture.
Yeah.
And whether we like it or not.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying about like Jack Tame's Q&A has become that sort of gotcha program. Like, doesn't matter if it's Chris Hipkins on there or Christopher Luxon on there. They both get like, gotcha. Oh, but how about it? Can you explain 3 words? And you're like,
it's just that like shock jock journalism. Yeah, it's like I caught you. Like let's get some clicks on this front page news and that's what it always becomes. It's like like. Whatever, what's his name? Jack Tame.
Jack Tame.
Yeah, he grilled the guy. Yeah,
and it's like an hour, production. So there's probably about 42 minutes of actual show on there, but nothing gets said. It's a messed up medium.
Exactly, that's what I mean. It's just like you spend so much time. He's said absolutely nothing. You are trying to trap the guy, and the other guy is trying to show you how skillful he is at evading it. All the while, we're sitting here and we're trying to get some information. We're trying to get a point out of this whole mess. And that's why, like ultimately, I think it's the people, it's the audience that loses out because of bullshit like this. Because, we came here trying to figure something out, and you have one guy trying to, create some clickbait journalism, and the other guy is just trying to save his political career by not saying the wrong shit because, God forbid you say something wrong. You're fucked. You're going to get cancelled. You're going to lose votes. You're going to lose, polls, which, again, like, I've never done one of these polls. They never asked me, so...
You're not on the Colmar Brunton list. Yeah. That's what, like, going back full circle to podcasts, that's what I like... And there's a capture with the New Zealand comedic scene. Like, there's the project. There's a fucking question competition thing where they, try to have one-liners like, ha, 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 and everyone's laughing. It's like being the radio one-liners. And it's just like this captured thing of comedians. I'd love for some of the comedians to, like, do a fucking garage podcast. Not be, sponsored by NZME.
Yeah.
The NZME ha podcast, and they chuck 5 ads in there, and it's 20 minutes long, and you go, this...
Yeah, brought to you by New Zealand On Air.
Yeah. And you're like, why can't these, because they work for the project, they work for NZME, why can't they be on there and being like, Hal Rogan or Theo Von, or not really Theo Von, he doesn't get political, but what's his name, Andrew Schultz and stuff, like, get on there and actually like say some
shit.
Talk some shit.
Yeah. You use your platform. I see a few of New Zealand's rappers try to do that every now and again, and I mean, all power to them. I hope to do more. I hope people listen. I would love to get one of these guys in here and talk that kind of stuff. It's just because that's what we're all about.
Yeah, like King's on his TikTok, and it's like a minute long, like. He throws jabs. It's awesome. Yeah. Like, and he's been on Timprovise, and like, they've had sort of a 45-minute jab back and forward, taking the piss. Exactly. Like maybe that's what it's going to be. Maybe it is going to be the rappers. Like, growing up in New Zealand, listening to Homebrew, rip the shit out of John Key for 5 years. Like, I'm not anti-John Key, but like how they put it just made you think and have a look at what he was up to, and that's good. Like, again, you don't have to agree that fuck John Key. What if John Key can suck? But that's like the start of a homebrew song type stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like, I hate these guys because they don't like John Key, but like they talk about what it's like growing up in Mangere, what it's like growing up in Avondale, and you go, I can see why you don't like their
point of view.
Yeah, I can see why you don't like their ideas either. Like, for your game, like that's something I've got to consider, But it's just NZME, the project, ha 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 ha, This is what happened in the news this week, ha ha ha. Like,
I find that frustrating too. It's just like it's mainstream media trying to hijack this format. It waters it down, it makes it ingenuine, it makes it just this whole same old
but that's what I don't get, like bullshit. The model in America and in the UK and now in Australia, like fuck, it's in Perth, so a couple of the Perth comedians are doing podcasts, and the Sydney guys, they're doing podcasts, and that's how they're selling their tickets. That's the model that they're doing in the States. They sell their tickets from their platform. They get their specials from their platform, and they are able to say what they say in a comedy show. They're able to practice what they do in a comedy show from their own fucking platform, and they don't have to worry about, watching the Q's and T's and doing a clean comedy skit. And like, I'd love to, like, Mike King did that on TV, and I remember my parents being like, "Oh, this guy's so rubbish, he just swears all the time." But like, he did that on TV, but it was like his comedy show on TV. Like Havoc and Newsboy, and it's funny that Jeremy Wells is on 7 Sharp, but like Havoc and Newsboy back in the day was like stirred shit, and that was on TV. Like, is there, and again, TV3 and C4, like that was semi-independent trying to shove it up the TVNZ type thing, but
yeah,
now it's NZME, and you can't do it.
Yeah. Well, like, I'm gonna put this out here right now. Comedians, any comedians out here, come talk your shit.
Yeah.
If you're not some, one of those mainstream bought by, New Zealand On Air or
you're on 7 Days in the Project.
NZME or any bullshit like that, come talk your shit. Yeah, come bring it here. Let's chop this up. I wanna hear what you got to say.
Yeah.
The Stag Roar.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I love your work, man. I want to plug this here. My man's over here, the Stag Roar podcast, does great things, talks to a variety of people. I had the pleasure of being on there with this very same T-shirt on. I just realized I was wearing the exact same T-shirt.
That's what I do.
Man. Like I love your work. It provided quite a bit of inspiration for me when I was starting out. Having that be my first experience, and I think it's a great thing that we're doing. Like it's just getting something a bit more raw for the people. We swear on these things. We talk all our shit. We share our opinions, but at the end of the day, it's all about connecting, sharing knowledge, and learning. Yeah, and I really appreciate you coming through today, man.
Thank you.
All the way from
like I said, I'm super proud that like you did what you said you were doing, and like it has been awesome to just see how quality it is. You're doing an awesome job, Alexi, and we're stoked for you, man.
Awesome.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's wicked.
Thank you. One time for your mind. That's right.
Yeah. Good shit.